In the last 2 weeks, a war carried on. A fire moved through southern Europe, and more than 300,000 people had to leave their homes. An earthquake hit southwestern Japan on a Tuesday afternoon and killed 34 people. All 3 of those went past you on a screen, and then you watched something else. I did too. I want to say that, before I say anything else, I saw all 3. I felt almost nothing, and then I got up and made coffee. Tonight, I want to give you 3 things: what your feelings actually run on, why a number switches them off, and one small instruction, written down around 2,000 years ago, that you can genuinely carry out this week. Let's start with the room, not the accusation. Here is what it actually looks like. It's late. You're lying on your side. Your thumb moves up. A headline comes into the frame, and it leaves the frame, and there is no pause in between. Somewhere in there is a number: 34, 300,000, $37.5 billion, which is what the defense secretary told the Senate this war has cost so far. The numbers go in. Nothing comes back. And then a small, unpleasant thought arrives, usually about a second later. Not about the news, about you. You're not the only person having that thought. The Reuters Institute has been measuring this since 2017. Back then, 29% of people said they sometimes or often avoid the news. In this year's report, it's 42%. The share of people they classify as casual or passive news users has gone from 16% to 25% in 5 years. That is not a moral collapse. That's a lot of people quietly stepping back from something. But I don't want to comfort you with a statistic and leave. I want to show you the actual mechanism, because it's stranger than you think, and it lets you off a hook you've been hanging on for a while. The explanation we usually reach for is scale. The numbers got so big that they stopped fitting inside a person. 300,000 is more than a mind can hold, so the mind puts it down. That's a fair reading, and it's the one I had. There's just something underneath it that nobody mentions, and it's the most interesting thing I found this week. The number doesn't have to be big. It starts at 2. In 2014, 4 researchers, Daniel Vastfjall, Paul Slovic, Marcus Mayorga, and Ellen Peters, published a paper in the journal PLOS 1 called Compassion Fade. They showed people a child who needed help and measured how much they gave. Then they showed a different group, 2 children who needed help. For one child, people gave an average of 37.7 Swedish kronor. For 2 children, 26.3. They ran it again with a different group. One child, 24.5. 2 children, 21.5. Same need. Twice the need, actually. Less giving. I should be fair about the limits of that study. The participants were Swedish university students, so this is not a measurement of the whole human species. But the direction has held up across a lot of studies since, and the direction is the part that matters here. Because, look at what it means. The drop doesn't start at 100,000. It doesn't start at 1,000. It starts when a second person walks into the room. 2 is not too many. 2 is not overwhelming. 2 is a dinner table. So whatever is happening in you when you scroll past a burning forest, it is not an overload. Your capacity was never the size you thought it was, and it was never going to be. This has a name, and someone has spent a career on it. Paul Slovic is a psychologist at the University of Oregon. He has been studying this since the 1970s, and the title of his best-known paper is basically the whole finding in one line: the more who die, the less we care. He calls it psychic numbing, and there's a second piece to it. He calls the singularity effect. One person moves us, and moves us to act, in a way that a group of people does not, even when everyone in the group has a name. The paper he published on this in 2007 has an epigraph at the top. It's a line he attributes to Mother Teresa, and it's the clearest description of the whole problem I have found anywhere. If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. Now here's the part that made me put my coffee down. You would assume that information helps. You'd assume that if someone is moved by one person's story, then telling them how big the problem really is would move them more. More context, more concern. That's how we all think it works. It's why every campaign, every news package, every appeal ends with the number. In 2007, Small, Lowenstein, and Slovic tested that. People leaving an experiment were given the chance to donate up to $5 to save the children. One group was told about Rokia, a real, specific, named girl. They gave an average of $1.43. Another group was told about Rokia, and then also given the statistics. How many millions are hungry? The scale of the crisis. The true, accurate, verified size of the problem. They gave $1.14. Adding true information made people give less. That result is worth a moment because of what it takes off your shoulders. The statistics did not fail to move those people. The statistics reached in and switched off something that was already on. That blank feeling you had at 1 in the morning is not evidence about your character. It's what this machine does when you feed it that input. The input this week has been enormous, and it has been almost entirely numbers. There's a line people quote about this. Statistics are human beings with the tears dried off. I want to be careful here, and I want to show you why. That line is good enough that it gets attributed to Slovic constantly. But when he uses it in his own paper, he writes, "Someone once observed." He doesn't put a name on it. Trace it, and you mostly end up at a writer called Paul Brodeur, quoted in someone else's book, and even the wording changes from version to version. Dried off, wiped away. I'm telling you that because this entire essay is about the way numbers and sources can quietly mislead a person, it would be a strange video to make while handing you a quote I hadn't checked. So here's where we've got to, about halfway. Feeling does not have arithmetic. It doesn't add up. It doesn't scale. It counts to 1, and after that, it starts going the other way. That is not a flaw you developed. That's the equipment. Which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question. If the equipment only counts to 1, then what exactly are we doing when we ask each other to care about the whole world? Is that instruction even deliverable? Someone worked on this a very long time before us. His name was Hierocles. He was a Stoic, writing in the 2nd century, and honestly, we nearly lost him entirely. Some of his work turned up as fragments of papyrus dug out of the ground in Egypt in 1901. The rest survives because a man called Stoicism, 500 years or so after Hierocles was alive, sat down and copied bits of it out into an anthology. Which is worth noticing on its own. A whole idea about the reach of human concern survives because one specific person did one specific small thing. Hierocles asks you to picture yourself standing inside a set of circles, one inside the other, like the rings in a tree. The first circle is your own mind. The next one out holds your immediate family, then your wider relatives, then your neighbors, the people in your town, then the towns next to yours, then your country, and the last ring, the widest one, is everybody, the whole human race, most of whom you will never meet. And then he gives an instruction. He doesn't say, love the outer ring as much as the inner one. He doesn't ask you to hold all of it at once. He says, pull the circles inward. Treat a stranger a little more like a friend. Treat a friend a little more like family. Treat family a little more like yourself. Move things one ring closer. I think that's the whole thing, and I read it the other way for years. It's easy to hear it as a capacity instruction. Feel more. Care wider. Hold the outer ring in your arms. It isn't. It's a movement instruction. It's about direction, not volume. You move one thing, one ring closer. That's the entire exercise. Nobody, including Hierocles, is asking you to feel the outer ring. I want to be straight with you about one thing. Hierocles had no idea what psychic numbing was. He wasn't predicting psychology, and I'm not going to pretend a man in the 2nd century secretly knew about a study from 2014. These are two separate things. One of them describes the limit. The other one gives you a direction to move in that doesn't require you to break the limit. So, what do you actually do with this? 3 things, and they're all small enough that you'll finish them. The first one, turn the number back into a person. You are not going to find a feeling for 300,000 people. Nobody is, but you can find one of them. One name, one face, one story that has an ending. That's not a lesser version of caring about the fire. As far as your equipment is concerned, that is the only version that exists. And there is real evidence for this. In that same compassion fade paper, there was a 3rd study. They took several children who needed help and described them as a family, as one unit rather than a set of separate cases. The fade reversed. Same number of people, different shape. The feeling came back. The second one. Pull one circle, not all of them. Not everything moves inward this week. Pick one thing. One issue, one person, one street. Move it one ring closer. And do one thing about it that is small enough that you will actually complete it. Not the version of the action you'd be proud of. The version you'll finish. The third one. And this is the one I need most. Let yourself not feel the rest. The rest of the outer ring stays where it is, and you go on not feeling much about most of it. That is not coldness. That's a finite amount of attention behaving the way finite things behave. I still catch myself running the audit at 1 in the morning, reading a headline, noticing the flatness, and grading myself on it. I don't think that ever fully stops. But it's a lot quieter once you know what the flatness actually is. Now let me be honest about what this doesn't do. It doesn't fix any of it. One person moving one circle inward does not put out a fire in Spain or end a war. I'm not going to sell you that. And this is not a case for switching off the news. Knowing what is happening in the world is worth something on its own, separately from what you feel about it. This isn't permission to look away. What it removes is something else. It removes a charge that was never true. That the blankness at 1 in the morning was information about the kind of person you are. It wasn't. It was information about how many were in the frame. You are not a person who stopped caring. You're a person built to recognize one other person at a time, and this month somebody handed you 300,000 of them at once. Tonight, at some point, you'll pick up your phone. Something terrible will come into the frame and leave the frame, and you'll feel that same flat nothing where a reaction should be. The only thing that's different now is that you know what that blank is. It isn't your character. It's a ceiling, and it's been there the whole time, and everyone, including the people who write the appeals. You can't feel 300,000 people. You can feel one. And one has always been the only place any of it starts.